On today's Byword, Dave and I will head to the quantum realm to review the latest MCU entry, Ant-Man and the Wasp, Quantumania. Plus nerd news to keep you up to date, and nerd commendations to keep you nerding out. Welcome to episode 142 of the Nerd Byword, a podcast built on dad jokes and being way in over your head, a perfect place to review Ant-Man and the Wasp Quantumania. But before our Byword Big Talk, it is time once again to dunk on the AI imbeciles in... Nerd News! Dave, now is the time where we point and laugh at them, even though it's an audio medium.
Ha ha, yes, you're right, actually. So I'm going by a news story that was published by Forbes magazine. However, I think the original reporting came from Reuters. So the U.S. Copyright Office has ruled that illustrations in a comic book that were created with the AI program Midjourney are in fact not protected by copyright law. Now, this is really interesting. This was sort of a test case, I think, in a lot of ways for how the Copyright Office is going to deal with this. The comic book is Zarya of the Dawn. It was written by Kristina Kashtanova and was submitted to the U.S. Copyright Office. All the images were created by Midjourney, which was not disclosed in the original copyright application. A letter was sent by the Copyright Office, which says, and I quote here, "We conclude that Ms. Kashtanova is the author of the work's text, as well as the selection, coordination, and arrangement of the work's written and visual elements. That authorship is protected by copyright. However, as discussed below, the images in the work that were generated by the Midjourney technology are not the product of human authorship. Because the current registration for the work does not disclaim its Midjourney-generated content, we intend to cancel the original certification issued to Ms. Kashtanova and issue a new one covering only the expressive material that she created." Letter actually talks a little bit about that only things that are of human authorship can in fact be copyrighted, citing precedent involving animals that have taken photographs, for example, and how those have not been granted any sort of copyright. And here is, I think, the real crux of the matter that is going to continue to make this AI situation very interesting. "A person who provides text prompts," again quoting from the letter, "to Midjourney does not actually form the generated images and is not the mastermind behind them. The information in the prompt may influence generated image, but prompt text does not dictate specific results." So this is, going to be a very, very interesting situation moving forward. I have been reading, a lot about this as somebody who is big into, trying to create comic books and break back into the industry a little bit myself. I'm very interested to see where all this is going, and obviously, I'm not a big fan of taking the human element out of art, especially. Because, the human element is what makes it art, right? So AI generated imagery is not something I'm particularly interested in working with. However, I am concerned with how it is influencing the industry. I know GPT is being used a lot for trying to create written prose stories now. There's some magazines that have actually stopped taking submissions except for from authors that they've worked with previously because they've started getting submissions that were written by ChatGPT. And that means, of course, that it's going to become increasingly harder for people to try to break into those industries when everybody is getting eyeballed very carefully. Is this even, generated by a human being? At this point, AI generation is not exactly perfect, and you can, very quickly pick up on imperfections and the like. But as that technology is refined, I think there's probably the potential for a lot of fraud here, including against something like the Copyright Office, because it's not going to be necessarily easy to figure out whether something was created by a human or artificial intelligence. I'm deeply troubled by all of this. I'm really hoping that we find a way to ethically use AI technology without, taking the human element out of art and storytelling. So I think this new story is a real positive in my book, in that we're focusing on artists and their rights over artificial intelligence. But I'm still troubled by the trends currently, in artificial intelligence as content creators. Kris, what are your thoughts on this one?
It truly is mind blowing, because how have these people not ever seen like a sci-fi movie where, like, have you not seen iRobot or anything of that ilk, where we give and we give and we give and we trust to artificial intelligence, and then they summarily take over. Like, we're going to have another Ultron in our situation. I'm being facetious, but not really, because the more we remove the human element from the creative process, the less authenticity that we have. And that's one of my biggest ethos, is to have authenticity. This gives me the same energy like when I teach foreign language classes, and I get the same energy from a 6th grade student who copies and pastes something into an online translator and tries to correct my Spanish, when I've studied almost on a daily basis since I was 16 years of age. This is the same type of people that we're dealing with, but fortunately for our children, they're only 12 years old, and this is one of those teachable moments where they can correct their ways. But these are full-grown adults who believe that they have the right and to pull off stuff like this and pose as a creator. So it's deeply troubling to me. I wholeheartedly agree that this is a very important precedent to set. But my I guess my pragmatic nature worries if it's going to do anything, because these people are growingly and increasingly resilient. So I think, rightfully so, social media has kind of banded together lots of folks taking a strong stance against AI stuff, but there's still like the fun aspects of just being goofy with AI, but it is a slippery slope, in my opinion, when it comes to people like this who don't get the novelty and like just playing around with an AI generator and take it seriously, like they can pass their work off as someone else. And as educators, the Chat GPT or whatever is deeply troubling, and the prospects of education in the future.
Yeah, to circle back, to art, I think one of the things that I find particularly troubling, and I think something that probably needs to be dealt with, within the legal system, I think this is something we're probably going to have some kind of there's going to have to be a law or something to deal with this. Is simply that AI does not create art in a vacuum. Instead, it basically is pulling from the works of other artists, right?
Exactly.
Basically, it's being fed all this different art that were created by humans, and then a lot of people that post like stuff that they've generated in Midjourney on social media even say, I popped in this artist's name because I wanted his style. Well, that's exactly what's happening here, right? This AI is basically using art that was created by human beings and then sort of remixing it and altering it, but it is still baseline human art. And I think that I should qualify as a copyright violation, right? I mean, if I were a artist, I write, but I'm not,
A visual
artistically
artist,
inclined.
yeah.
If I were a visual artist, I would be extremely troubled that this artificial intelligence is just kind of suck up things that I have created and then spit out some kind of imitation of me, which it is not able to do. It cannot imitate, my art style unless it has input of my art style. So I think there should be probably some kind of law that says that not without express permission are you as a company allowed to use somebody else's art in order to generate new works based on their art. I think that should be a clear copyright violation. The problem, of course, is that copyright law, like really all law, is extremely slow to respond to new technological trends. And we're probably going to be in no man's land for quite a while until the legal system catches up with what's going on in technology right now.
Yeah, and for those of you that want certain characters drawn in the art style of a given artist, let me break some news to you. There are lots of artists whom you may be fans of their work that have commissions, and if you want a character drawn by them, have them commissioned work. But as is like the going rate, I guess, with so much of technology and kind of at least American consumerism, we have this like growing petulance of like what I want and I want it now and I don't want to pay for it. And so like this is kind of like rewarding the oh god, what's that girl? What's the girl from Willy Wonka? The spoiled brat that wants what she wants. Is it Veruca? Is that the spoiled one?
I think something like that. I haven't seen that in years, to be honest with you.
If you really want something done in the art style of Chris Bachalo, you want Chris Bachalo to draw a Spider-Man, well, go commission Chris Bachalo. If you want Lucas Wernick to draw you a Superman, go commission him and pay that human being, the correct agreed upon amount that are their rates. And if you can't afford that, then guess what? You don't get it. And so just to take this easy way out on so many different things is just frustrating to me.
Yeah, and it's not like there are not things that AI can effectively do. I was dealing with a system just recently where you can feed in a photo and it animates the photo. And I was using historical paintings of various figures as a way of using that in my classroom, so I could like take a painting of Henry VIII and I could animate it so it looks like he's actually like moving around and blinking and looking at the students. And that really caught their attention. Like that sort of thing is really cool. And you're dealing with historical paintings or pictures of family members that, have long passed. Yes. And you want to see that animated. There's really cool things there, right? But you're also, you're dealing with stuff from an educational standpoint or personal property, but you're not, violating an artist's copyright at that point, right? And I think that's I think really the biggest, problem here for me is that AI is basically just at this point remixing pre-existing art as a way of imitating a existing artist's art style. And I think to me, that's just a copyright violation.
Did you make him say, "I'm Henry VIII, I am"?
No, there's no vocal thing. It's just like kind of moving around, blinking and smiling a little bit. I find that technology really interesting because it's made for photos, but if you shoot a painting through there, it can do the same thing. It's kind of almost it's a very surreal experience to see sort of a painting come to life like that. But it definitely gets students' attention. And when you're dealing with, historical figures that have been, dead for 500 years or something, it's definitely an attention grabber to see them sort of animatedly move around. So like that technology I will continue to integrate in my classroom whenever possible, just because it's an attention grabber.
See the social media ad for Thomas Jefferson singing the sea shanty all the time, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh my god, I don't know if I needed that. There
once was a ship that put to sea.
All right, Chris. Let's talk about movie news since we got into legal quagmiring here again.
All right, so we're headed back to Middle Earth. This is probably the first positive thing out of David Zaslav's mouth since he raised all the things that we love in a way that makes Smaug look like a level 1 Charmander. Fresh off of the acclaim of Amazon's The Rings of Power Season 1, it was recently announced that multiple Lord of the Rings films are in the works, with the focus reportedly being on Tolkien's additional writing rather than revisiting the Peter Jackson films. Thank God. While mum's the word on exactly who will be taking on these new projects, Jackson and his representatives did release a statement saying, quote, "They," being WB and Embracer, "have kept us in the loop every step of the way. We look forward to speaking with them further to hear their vision for the franchise moving forward," end quote. Dave, you are famously curmudgeon-y when it comes to Tolkien at all and fantasy at large, with the exception of our beloved Witcher? Any swaying in your emotions so far?
No, not really. I mean, look, I cannot deny that there was this. Let me put it this way. To me, the creation of the Lord of the Rings movies was a masterclass in filmmaking, and I will freely admit that. Even though some of the storytelling of the original books is not super to my liking necessarily, I am totally able to say this is masterful, movie making. On the flip side, I will also say that the Hobbit movies left me completely cold. And I think a lot of that had to do with the change in, more green screen work and the shift in special effects, a lot less, practical effects, a lot less, forced perspective, as a way of dealing with, the Hobbit situation and how short they're supposed to be. I think when they abandoned some of those things, it was less of a masterclass in movie making, and much more to me felt like a cash grab. It also has a lot to do with the fact that they were taking a fairly short book, and then expanded it outward into 3 movies, and it became this bloated mess. So I think moving forward, when you're looking at what at least what I know of the additional writings of Tolkien in sort of that Lord of the Rings universe, my impression is that we're dealing a lot with genealogies, histories, and fragmentary storytelling, right? So putting that together into cohesive movie is going to probably either require a similar expansion like what they did with the Hobbit, which could create bloat, or a wholesale addition and or reinvention, which could be very interesting, but is probably going to leave a lot of Tolkien fans cold. So meh. I mean, I guess I'm going to be seeing a lot of Lord of the Rings fans whining here soon again on social media, and I can't blame them if they're not getting what they're looking for. But the news kind of leaves me cold, to be honest with you.
I'm gonna borrow one of your terms. I'm taking a wait and see approach, because I'm waiting to see who's attached to these projects, because I was open-minded when it came to the Rings of Power, and I was very impressed with the work that they did. Namely, the acting performances were out of this world. And I think I totally agree with what you said with The Hobbit. The only one caveat that I'll make is Benedict Cumberbatch as Smaug was a revelation. It was really fun, and the fact that you had him playing off of Martin Freeman and their history on one of my favorite shows of the tens that you actually turned me on to was Sherlock, and so seeing them playing back and forth on the screen as Hobbit and Dragon was a lot of fun. But I think the Hobbit films were a cautionary tale of too much power on Peter Jackson's part, and he couldn't quit it. And we kind of saw a similar situation with Jeff Johns and the Jeff Johns verse that was the DCEU. Like he had too much say with the DC film projects, I believe. And so I'm excited to see like a new voice and a new direction taken with this. Now, if we're just going to be honest with it, this is probably a cash grab over a popular IP from Zaslav's part. But if we can get unique creative voices, some kind of visionaries in the director's chair, and some cool actors that need more of a spotlight, then I'm here for it.
And the thing is too, man, and I have not forgotten this. Pre-production on The Hobbit was started under Guillermo del Toro, and now I was there for that. I love Guillermo del Toro's work. I adore that man, and seeing his take on The Hobbit would have been super interesting. And the fact that he ended up stepping away and they brought back Peter Jackson, it kind of completely killed my excitement, because out of all of Tolkien's work, and maybe because it's more aimed at a younger audience or something, I tend to gravitate much more strongly towards The Hobbit generally, as opposed to The Lord of the Rings. And I was kind of excited to see what was going to happen with that under Del Toro, and then that didn't happen, and that made me extremely sad. So
I personally gravitate more towards The Hobbit. You came up with like a real scholastic, definition and reasoning behind it. I just like Bilbo more as a protagonist than Frodo. Frodo is a whiny punk, and Bilbo is like, you see more character growth within The Hobbit, as opposed to Frodo, who's just whining the whole time. So
it sounds about right.
All right, that wraps up our nerd news segment. What are your reactions to this ruling against AI copyright and the development of more Lord of the Rings films? When we come back from this, our first break, we are going to be reviewing the latest entry in the MCU, Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here once more with our byword. Big Talk! And as is our custom with any film or series review, we each have 3 likes, 3 dislikes, and then a final grade overall. So, Dave, Quantumania, a hot button issue, I guess. Like, it's been really ragged on by critics. The audience score has kind of come back, but say what you will about Rotten Tomatoes scores, it's kind of been irreparably damaged at this point. Let's go with our likes first. What is your first like of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania?
I think you and I are probably going to agree on this, and I'm not surprised that this was first on the list for pretty much both of us. And it's just Kang as a character, as an interpretation, as acted by Jonathan Majors. This character is really intriguing to me. I've encountered Kang a handful of times in comic books, but I'm not like super deep into Kang lore. So I came into this with a fairly open mind, and I have to say that what little we got of Kang, and I understand that this is the beginning. Well, technically Loki was, but I understand this is the beginning of this version of Kang's journey in the MCU. We didn't get a whole lot, but what we got, I found very intriguing. I think there were very interesting hints dropped about, what's coming with the character. There were very interesting hints dropped about what's coming through that character with the future of the MCU. But most importantly, I think the character just really clicked. Maybe that has a lot to do with the power of the charisma of the actor here, but there was something really cool, calm, and collected, but at the same time there was like a lot of danger bubbling just below the surface that just every once in a while kind of spiked outward. And I really appreciated Jonathan Majors' restraint in a lot of ways and how he portrayed Kang, not this mustache twirling villain, but really somebody who still waters, that run really deep. It left me wanting more, and I want to see where the character goes from here. So Kang to me clicked in every way, shape, or form.
Yeah, and I'm gonna piggyback, and we'll just go ahead and bleed right into my first like, because the range that Jonathan Majors was able to show, particularly if you extend that into like the post-credit scenes. And the fact that this is a tall order to have like a story completely based on the variants of one particular character, you need someone with the acting range. And like, I cannot imagine, this might be blasphemous, but I think this is the best casting in the MCU that we've ever seen. All respect to Robert Downey Jr. I know he always gets his flowers, and rightfully so, as Tony Stark, Iron Man. But I think this is the most pitch perfect casting we've ever had. When you see like Ramatut and the Council of Kangs and the range, and as you said, the restraint, that soft spokenness of some of those variants is just mind blowing. And so like, I'm very, say what you will about this film as in general. And you hinted at it with like, we didn't get enough Kang, but like, where we're going with the future of the MCU after a noted dip after Endgame and Infinity War, like there's been a lot of knee-jerk reactions to Phase 4. in Phase 5. But I am really excited to see where we go from here. And that is built completely on the shoulders of Jonathan freaking Majors.
Yeah, I'll agree with that. And it's I've not been at any point one of these people that is just like really ripping into post end game MCU content. I think there's a lot of stuff to really like, but it is undeniable that the story kind of crescendoed and then things slowed down a little bit, and not everybody's doing very well dealing with that little slowdown. So to borrow a phrase from good old JR in the wrestling world, it finally feels like business is about to pick up.
It's almost like the way you laid it out like that. It's almost like we're in Phase 1 all over again, and Endgame kind of Infinity War kind of toppled all the pieces, and then Endgame kind of slowly placed them back over, and now with the powers that be, the core heroes of the first Infinity series is like being removed from the board, is like we're kind of having a reset. It's almost like we're in Phase 1 again, and so like I can be patient, and I think that's something that American audiences don't really have, is patience. So I'm really excited for where we're going.
And it is a reset. I mean, I think we have to desperately just accept that. There's characters have departed, new characters need to be introduced, the scene needs to be set. You can't jump into another big Avengers event when a huge chunk of the Avengers are not there anymore.
Yeah.
Like, you have to rebuild, and that is something that is going to take a little bit of time. And I think there's interesting things on the horizon if people just give it a chance to sort of naturally grow into something again. But maybe that's just
it's almost like the old John McEnroe quote about his kids having affluenza. Like, we got so spoiled with the Infinity Saga that now we expect that every single film and every single series.
Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like.
All right, Dave. Apparently a very polarizing figure, at the center of which is my most viral tweet ever, is your second big like of the film.
Yeah, I'm just going to say it. I understand that this is pretty different from the comic book, but I ended up really liking this interpretation of MODOK. And I'm not going to make any apologies for that. I know it's different, and I know comic book purists are not, going to enjoy this maybe quite as much as I did. And in fairness, I think we all have our sacred cows when it comes to comic books and adaptations. For me, it's obviously Superman. I've said this many times, and I can understand and sympathize with fans that of MODOK that are not happy with this interpretation. Like, I get it. I really understand if these kinds of wholesale changes were made to somebody like Superman. I probably would not enjoy it either. So MODOK is just not a sacred cow for me. And so what they did here, I thought was really interesting. I really enjoyed that they were able to tie this back around to the first Ant-Man movie, by bringing a character back in that fashion. I really love the juxtaposition between the constant attempts at killing everybody and the cordial nature of verbal interaction. Like, hey, Scott, how you doing? And then suddenly tries to kill him. Like, I found that juxtaposition so awesome. Like, it made me laugh every time. And I will freely admit, not all of the humor in this movie landed for me, but that juxtaposition landed for me every stinking time. Even all the way at the end, when he finally runs into Hank again, he's like, hey, Hank, and then suddenly he's trying to kill him. And I'm like, it's just like, that juxtaposition got me every time. I have to say, I also ride for MODOK Buttshot. I thought that was hilarious, so thank you for that. And I also found the ending of the character, at least in this movie, really interesting, where he, rides to the rescue and starts yelling, I am not a like, I thought just like the whole arc of the character, this particular interpretation of the character really worked. I'm hoping that they figure out a way to move forward with the character to bring him back, because obviously MODOK is a pretty important character in the comics, and I think there's potential to slowly move him maybe closer to what we're known for in the comics, right? But I found the character really amusing and a very cool, interesting way of tying things back, to earlier in the series. So I was entertained by MODOK.
Yeah. For context, the TLDR of my tweet was some of you just need to stop hate watching uh the MCU, because there's so many people that are just praying like candlelit vigil for the downfall of the MCU for whatever reason. I don't know. Maybe they're DC fans. Maybe they are just tired of going to MCU movies. Like, to which I say, just stop going. Like, stop. Like, the fact that you're up in arms about MODOK, that's not a serious character. It's not. And I found all two of the MODOK stands in my mentions who conveniently had accounts created within the past few weeks with a MODOK profile picture and all of 12 followers. So the intended audience for that tweet was perfect. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. My only nitpick is coming in my dislikes with the character. But I thought it was really kind of fun. And the fact that, like, I don't understand why some people don't see this, comic book purists, as, like, to borrow a phrase from DC, the MCU's an Elseworlds. It's an alternate universe. So it's not going to be page for page carbon copy MODOK. Why would you want that? So you can stay true to the character, sure, but if you just have a page for page carbon copy of MODOK, go read the comic book. Like, yeah, I thought it was a lot of fun. And maybe Don't Be a Dick from Cassie, and then he's like, I am not a dick, as like his death knell. Like, that was great for me.
Yeah, and again, I think I am a little more sympathetic maybe to that, because I have kind of gone through a character that I really like being adapted for the big screen and not exactly hitting the notes I was hoping for in the most recent Superman, as put out there by Zack Snyder. And so I understand, I think, where some of these fans are coming from. But also MODOK seems like a weird sacred cow to have.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. If you are a MODOK stan, if like he's your sacred cow, to use your terminology, I legitimately do not believe you.
Yeah, it seems like a weird character to be like, this is my ride or die. This character needs to be the exactly the right interpretation. Or I'm like, MODOK?
He's a
really?
He's a big head in a booster seat with baby legs. Like, get over yourself.
He's basically murderous Humpty Dumpty.
Yes.
I mean, like let's not mince any words here,
Also, if you want a comic accurate one, the Patton Oswalt show is a masterpiece and still exists. So go watch that.
All right, Chris. So, what is your second like for Quantumania?
This was the biggest pleasant surprise of the film for me. Like, I knew that I was going to love Jonathan Majors. I love everything else that he's in. I love Lovecraft Country. I love The Harder They Fall. Everything I've seen with Jonathan Majors has been spectacular. I knew that I was going to get the dorky dad jokes from Paul Rudd, and I knew I was going to, like, that was going to be perfect for me as a dorky dad. But the biggest pleasant surprise was like the Hank and Janet parts of this film. And like, there's a lot to be said about, roles for actors who reach a certain age. A lot of this discourse was kind of brought up again when we got a masterpiece of a film like Everything Everywhere All at Once, which I don't know if that counts as a nerd commendation, but good God, go watch that movie. It's perfect. And so seeing Michelle Pfeiffer and Michael Douglas as, folks who are advanced in age, but still like having time to shine in a big budget film, like an MCU film, is really, really cool. And, Janet being, Michelle Pfeiffer being a bad in the quantum realm is like a rebel and like an action star. And then having Hank and his freaking aunts, like just using his genius was kind of cool. And now it's to the point where I'm like, do I want a prequel series with Hank and Janet? Because, some MCU critics have been like, well, how are these, how are the X-Men going to pop up after all this time? And how are certain characters like Captain Marvel just going to be it's kind of a wedged in here to a previously established timeline? I'm like, Well, they kind of had Hank and Janet like 20 years before the main MCU timeline, and we kind of took that running. And so I kind of want a Hank and Janet series because I really love them in this movie.
I do too. And I think you hit something really interesting on the head here. I think we are, as a society, really, especially when it comes to like movies and television, we're really overly focused on youth and beauty, and kind of reject wisdom and normality a little bit. And so seeing not that Michelle Pfeiffer is not still absolutely gorgeous, but
Silver
seeing
Fox era, we love that for her.
holy smokes. But just like having characters that are older and wiser for that up on the big screen, having adventures rather than Obi-Wan Kenobiing the situation, like they show up for 30 minutes, mentor some youngster and then die unceremoniously, is kind of nice. Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Hank as a character is probably one of the stronger through lines of the Ant-Man movies. I think I really enjoyed him from the word go, even in the first one when we got that de-aged flashback of him. The character just really sings. And yeah, I agree. I would totally love to see some kind of prequel where we get to see, the original Ant-Man and the original Wasp doing spy adventures or something. I'd totally be there for that.
With a caveat, we do have to recast. Please, no more
Uncanny Valley?
Nope, no more. Do you have to recast if you do that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that. Let's recast.
All right, Dave, what is your third and final for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania?
I think it's the base concept. And when we get to our dislikes, I think you'll find that maybe I didn't enjoy the movie quite as much as I hoped I would, given the base concept. I really like the idea of stranding everybody in the quantum realm, Janet being the one who's been there and kind of guiding things along. There's something she didn't tell people about, that is, a danger that's lurking there. And then, something that the trailer really leaned into that the movie didn't, is the temptation of Scott Lang. I think that they really dropped the ball on that part, because the notion of, hey, you lost all this time, I can give it back to you. That was such an interesting hook that absolutely went nowhere, right? So the base concept that you have Scott, and what his family means to him, and that there's tension between him and his daughter, and that he could go back and he could, reclaim that lost time and wipe out the tension between him and his child, because he's not the absent father, even though that wasn't in his power. That had me really intrigued. So although the execution didn't quite live up to what I was hoping for, I think the base concept of the movie is incredibly strong. Now, why did it not, live up to my hopes? I think we can talk about that in our dislikes. But I have to say, as a trilogy closer, I guess, if you will, possibly the last Ant-Man movie, I thought that this as a concept was really, really strong.
Yeah, I will say that while I agree with you, I think they did give that moment to Janet, where Kang was tempting her quite a bit about going back and seeing hope and losing regaining all that time that was lost. But I would have liked to seen it from Scott's perspective as well. I don't think they leaned in it too far enough, but our beloved Gail Simone kind of put it in perspective for me when she compared it to an episode of Star Trek. And I think that's so perfect. There's so many sci-fi elements, just weird, some strange looking aliens. And it just felt like an old school, maybe even an original series, Star Trek episode. And I really loved it for that.
I think that's fair. All right, Chris, so that brings us to your final what you got?
You really mentioned this. I remember when we had Ash from Exavords on, as one of your likes of that film, is the emotional resonance, and something that I appreciate being the through line of all three of these films is the family elements. And as a father, as a head of household, that just really connects with me. And the fact that in this new era of the MCU where we're resetting the game board, if you will, is you've got to stand out, and the fact that we can have that continual through line that stands out even with a new actress as Cassie Lang is really, really important to me. And the family dinners, making up for the lost birthdays, were really cute and really poignant for me. So I just love the family element that is ever present throughout all three of these films.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with that. I think that here again, I think the execution wasn't quite what I was hoping for in certain places, but I too appreciate that through line, and I'm really, really glad that they took a sort of a family oriented approach to this whole, 3 movie cycle. I think that was a very, very smart thing to do. To lean into that, and I think this movie in particular needed to lean into that, in particular because of Scott's absence. So yeah, I'll totally agree with that.
All right, Dave. Now we switch to our dislikes. What is the first dislike you've hinted at it a tad? Your first dislike of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
I think that between the last movie and this movie, the quantum realm has lost a little bit of its uniqueness. I think you can say they shrunk down and are in the quantum realm, and pay lip service to the notion, but nothing about this really felt like that. It just felt like some random alien planet, like, oh, there's some weird creatures, there's a spaceship you're flying around, there's an evil overlord, there's a rebellion, you have characters that inexplicably look human but they're not human, like Bill Murray. And so like the quantum realm as this really strange, ethereal, weird place, kind of was chugged in this movie in exchange for random alien world and random alien plot number 46. Like, evil ruler, rebellion, here's some characters they throw in with, they help with the rebellion, blah blah blah. So I'm not sure what I was expecting here, but given the brief glimpses we got of the quantum realm in the past, and the reverence, the fear that was sort of aimed at that realm, and then just the mysteriousness of how Jan was referring to her time there and what she's been up to. I didn't think thriving civilization ruled by Kang the Conqueror was what we were going to get there. So I was a little disappointed about how generic I think the quantum realm ended up being in this movie in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think especially when you come at the end and like especially like the time scale when in comparison, like how it's a different time down there, and it seems like they came back to the very same moment that they left, or at least that's what we were led to believe. I don't know if Kang's involvement had something to do with that, but it didn't really feel like it did, and it kind of had lost its luster.
Yeah, that I think that's exactly right. There was a lot about how pat the ending was too. I think that we're going to have to talk about at some point later. Um, let's just move on. Chris, what is your first dislike of the movie?
This is probably the only like really strong criticism that I have. Everything else is more of a nitpick, um, which is why I'm surprised that the movie's been so negatively reviewed. Um, the movie's called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, and Hope is an afterthought in this movie. She does have some moments of like coming in and saving the day and stuff, but she doesn't have like a central plot. She doesn't have a story arc. She's just there as a supporting character that saves everybody's butt half the time. So I would have liked to have some kind of storyline, maybe her coming in as a stepmother role to Cassie, um, and dealing with that. There wasn't even like a strong like romantic plot at all. I almost forgot, like, did they make them a couple? Are they a couple? They had like, it wasn't like super strong in any direction for her, and I'm not sure why.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that there was that was a big misstep. I mean, named character in title of movie matters not nearly as much as she should. And, happens a little more often than I care to think about, to be honest with you. So I was disappointed with that as well. I think there were so many interesting opportunities for an interesting story arc for her. But a lot of that stuff was dropped. I think, I'm probably gonna talk about this. in my next dislike, so I'm going to put a pin in that. But I will totally agree that this was a pretty egregious not sidelining so much, but like shuffling to the back of priorities for a really interesting character.
All right, let's dive right into that dislike, Dave. What you got?
Okay, so let's. I'm gonna take my podcaster hat off for a second and put my writer hat on, if you don't mind. This is not anything particularly new for people who enjoy movies or comic books, but I think this movie suffers from a conflict problem. Not that Kang is not a great antagonist. That obviously needs to be there, but I'm more talking about like conflict within the family unit, internal conflict within the characters. There are a lot of interesting things that the characters have done or are talking about. There is some resentment building, but that never goes anywhere because everybody is just so darn reasonable. I think if we take a moment and step back, we realize that, especially with the people we love, we're not always reasonable. There's hurt feelings. There's a sense of betrayal when something doesn't go the way we think it should, and none of that exists. Like when Jan is spilling her guts about all the secrets she kept about, the quantum realm and her time there, everybody's like, "Oh, it's okay. We understand." And I'm like, no, we don't. Be mad. You're in the quantum realm. You're being hunted by this dictatorial character, and it's all because she decided not to tell you. Oh, she had a thing with Bill Murray. Hank's totally fine with that. Oh well, even the conflict that I think had the most potential, which was the conflict between Cassie and Scott, is not much of a conflict. It's like Cassie's like, I want you to do more, you stopped helping people, and Scott is like, yeah, but I'm just need a break, and then it's just like fizzles away. And really, to me, that should have been a place where a door opens in conflict. Like she says, it's about Scott not wanting to help anymore, but really there's this underlying resentment because he was gone for all that time.
Right.
And yeah, it's not his fault, but it still hurts the child that daddy wasn't around. And then you can build towards a big catharsis, and then you have a climax that's not just about giant ants attacking Kang, but also an emotional catharsis. And I think that's the thing that we're missing the most in this movie, is emotional catharsis. You do not let the good guys, basically, in this movie come into a strong enough conflict that you can then resolve by the end. And there is so much potential for conflict. Maybe Cassie, resents Hope as this figure that came in and is trying to be her stepmom. Cassie resents Scott because Scott wasn't there all this time. Hank is having issues with Jan because she was up to all this stuff and never told him about it. And Hope has issues with Jan because she kept all these secrets. And then you build up all these emotional conflicts, and then you bring them to the climax at the same time as the climax emerges between them and Kang. And then you have a climax that feels satisfying, not just on a spectacle level, but on an emotional level. And I think that's the misstep of this movie more than anything. There were so many moments where I was like, okay, emotional catharsis. Oh, this is really bold. This can be really good. And it never builds. This goes right up to the ending as well. Like, I love that moment when Hope comes back through that portal, right? And saves Scott, and then they're both standing there and they're kind of looking out over the little rebellion being victorious, and the sense is they're stuck. This was a real sacrifice.
Yes.
This was a moment of real meaning. And the next time we see them, they're in the quantum realm and they have to fight their way back or something to warn the Avengers something's coming or whatever, right? I thought, holy crap, that's bold, And then, Cassie just opens the portal back up and they're back home. So anything that would have given you a real moment of emotional connection, of interpersonal drama. Cassie, who's resented her dad and Hope this whole time, now has to face a world where they're not going to be around, and she has to step up and fill their shoes. Like, all of the stuff that would have been really emotionally satisfying is just not there. And I think that, above all else, is my main criticism of the movie. I really enjoyed it as sort of, popcorn fare, but the building blocks were there for something that could have stayed with you. And it just doesn't. Even having now seen this a week ago, a lot of the particulars are, already fading from memory because the interpersonal conflicts were just not memorable. The emotional connection wasn't as strong as it could have been with these characters. And that, I think, is the real problem with the movie, and the reason it's probably not resonating as strongly as it could have. It's very ably made. It's very fun in a lot of places. But what's missing is that emotional connection.
Yeah, I don't feel any stakes in this movie except for the one moment that I was just like, oh snap, something's about to go down, is when Kang and Majors is doing all the heavy lifting in this film for a lot of reasons, is when he's like torturing them in prison. You know what I'm talking about? And like he's like flinging them around, and that part, I was just like, oh snap. That was the only time I felt real stakes in this. See, I had the same reaction. I was like, oh snap, they're stuck in the quantum realm. This is really strong. This is a perfect lead-in to Kang Wars or Kang Dynasty or whatever. And then we didn't get that. It was just like, nah, just kidding.
Two Kang, Two Furies?
I heard another podcast say this, X-Ray Vision, great podcast, check it out. In their review of the film, of like, yes, Janet was like, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. But if she would have said, listen, there's an evil overlord, like, we probably wouldn't have been dicking around in the quantum realm, you know? Like, if she would have just said, listen, there's this dude, Kang, you don't want to mess with, we probably wouldn't have even had this movie. And like, at least I understand being a forgiving nature, but still the revelation that your wife had a relationship. They also made, in the same podcast, made the joke that like she did not have relations with Krylar, Bill Murray's character. Look at the chemistry she had with Kang. There was something going down with her and Kang. Like, the fact that revelation was just so quickly overdone. And I also wonder, like, and no shots to Catherine Newton. I know a lot of people are up in arms that the previous actress got replaced. And the way of her knowing was like the press release. And so like, I don't know if that has to play into the fact that we don't have the emotional resonance. I think that the chemistry that Catherine Newton has with the rest of the cast, kind of leans into the reason why she was chosen for this role, to have this big feature film. The previous actress was only in like one scene, in Endgame. So I just don't know why we didn't, like, the bare bones of it is there. Like you said, the base concept is really good. The bare bones of it is right there. And we had all the potential in the world for some really meaty, emotionally hefty stuff. And we just didn't commit to it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And that's why, to me, it's kind of a, there's that old joke, which I totally disagree with because I'm a huge fan of Chinese food, but there's that old joke, you eat Chinese and 30 minutes later you're hungry again. Like, I found the movie satisfying in the moment, and 30 minutes later I had already forgotten about it. So that's, I think, and that is a interpersonal conflict issue at top to bottom.
Well, now I want some pepper chicken.
So what's your second dislike of the movie, Chris?
This is, again, more of a nitpick. I think we've tackled most of the big stuff for this movie, except for my third dislike. It's kind of a big one. This one, but it's kind of in lines with the commitment that we just talked about. It's like we needed more MODOK for Corey Stoll's kind of appearance, is like his return in this pivotal role. I don't think he was in enough scenes to kind of have the emotional heft and impact that he could have had. So I think we needed some more MODOK to really kind of drive that point home. And his redemption was pretty streamlined and a little too quick. So we needed more MODOK.
I'm just going to go ahead and agree. I don't think I have anything else to add to that other than I really just liked MODOK. I think MODOK worked really well. So I would have been okay with more MODOK.
Dave, your third and final dislike.
Yeah, so I think the only other thing that I really want to mention here is just that one of the charming things about the first two Ant-Man movies was The kind of things that happen in our world, right? And so when we removed them into the quantum realm, that real world connection, the reaction of normal everyday people who aren't, in the superhero business, all of that stuff kind of got lost. And that was like half of the fun of the first two movies. And I think that's a problem that could have been very easily fixed by having Luis kind of get sucked into the quantum realm as well. I think that character is sort of a breakout character in the first two, and a lot of people really, really enjoy that character. And so for that character to not even make any kind of appearance in the movie is just weird to me. I think the logical thing would have been that he's visiting Scott or something when this whole thing goes down. He gets sucked into the quantum realm as well, and then we have a normal an everyman, somebody who is not neck deep in the superhero business, kind of reacting to some of the things that are happening in the quantum realm. And I think that could have been a very nice addition to the movie. It could have kind of knocked the humor up a notch, because I don't think it always necessarily landed. And could have, you need a point of view character, right? When you're putting a bunch of characters in like a really strange situation. And I don't think there was a very clear point of view character here. All of these characters had been in some way, shape, or form involved in craziness in the past. So having a real strong everyman character being like, what the heck is going on, would have been really, really good for this movie. So the omission of Luis, I think, was not a good move.
I got it. I've got it right here. Okay. So he comes in after the fact to the house to drop off more books for Scott to sign. And he like lumbers his way into the place. He gets sucked into the quantum realm. The rest of them don't even know he's there. Then they bump into him. They're like, Luis, what are you doing here? And then he does his textbook like summary of what happened, speaking really fast. Like that would have been perfect.
Yeah, he's already there. They're like, what in the world? That would have been awesome. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, but I thought, omitting that character was just not a good move.
And like Luis plus like the Glob Herman character, the Jello guy, like that would have been perfect chemistry.
Oh God, yes. throw broccoli guy in there too, and we really got it going
on. Jean Grey fans were crying and throwing up.
All right, Chris. So, what is your final dislike of the movie?
I know I said I had nitpicks, but I think this is a pretty big one. Did we really just waste William Jackson Harper, dude?
You mean my pick for Mr. Fantastic?
Yeah, and he was so great in this movie, like in this incredibly limited role. He was so fun, like playing with like the kind of the forgotten tropes of being a telepath and like being overwhelmed by reading people's thoughts and all that stuff. Just like I don't know how I feel about that, because he was great in this role, but like we really just take this immense talent and used him on like a one-stop character. That's deeply frustrating for me.
I will totally agree with that. I'm a huge fan of William Jackson Harper. Big fan, especially because of his work on The Good Place. I think he's just brilliant. And I was really hoping especially when the cast announcement happened, that there was something there, like this was the beginning of something for him. He was going to have some kind of, bigger role in the larger MCU. And very clearly that is not the case. And I find that extremely depressing.
Yep. All right. What a sour note to end on. But overall grade, Dave, for Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania.
I think there's a good movie in there, and I did enjoy myself while I was watching it. It's that lack of interpersonal conflict, that heightened emotion, that the sense of catharsis when you hit the climax of the story, that really just knocked it down a peg for me. I would give it like a solid C plus maybe. I just think that it's there's a whole lot of wasted potential there. Like this could have been a real standout movie for the MCU. And the way it turned out is just kind of all right, I guess. Chris, how about you?
I'm straddling between a B- and a C+. I'm biased going in. I knew Jonathan Majors was going to be amazing. So I'm right on that line because he's doing all the heavy lifting. I have the same criticisms as you. However, I am, even if I didn't enjoy this movie as much as I wanted it to, it's certainly not as god awful as people are saying. So like, please don't misconstrue our thoughts on that. But I am very excited for where we're going in the future.
I think it's a perfectly fine popcorn movie. I think that's probably the biggest thing to say. Like it's certainly entertaining in the moment. And I don't think anybody going to the theater to watch this is necessarily wasting money or something. I just think that what is a passably decent movie could have been a truly great movie with a little bit more work on the script.
All right, that wraps up our Byword Big Talk. What were your thoughts and reactions to Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania? Please be sure to hit us up on social media at NerdByword on Twitter and Instagram. But after we come back from our final break, we're bringing you 2 nerd commendations. All right, we are back for the fan favorite segment where we recommend the goods to you. We call it All right, Dave, I already wholeheartedly second your nerd commendation.
Yeah, so we've talked previously and nerd commended previously, various online, streaming services, if you will, for comic books. The 2 big ones that we've talked about a lot, Marvel Unlimited over at Marvel, and then DC Universe Infinite. I did want to, kind of punt back to DC Universe Infinite, though, and re-nerd commend it to renew my nerd commendation. Because a few months back, they changed their service up a little bit by adding a new tier. And this tier has really sort of, shaped how I consume DC Comics moving forward. And that is that DC Universe Infinite now has a tier that they call Ultra. And the Ultra tier has done some really cool stuff. For one, on the regular DC Universe Infinite, new comic books are added 90 days after print release. Ultra knocks that down to 30 days. So basically, you're only 1 month behind on reading new comic books with the service, as opposed to 3 months. That alone is already a huge step in the right direction. Cannot argue with that. Also, they have an additional 5,000 roughly comic books that are Ultra tier only. A lot of these are Vertigo and DC Black Label. So a lot of the stuff that I have a huge affinity for anyways, including the Vertigo stuff, is on the Ultra tier. There's also this really cool thing that they do where if you're reading comic books, single issues, and they have a digital trade paperback or omnibus available, you can actually switch to reading it that way, which means you don't have issue breaks to contend with where you have to, open the next issue over and over again. It's just one continuous read. So if you prefer reading in trade on the Ultra tier, you can do that oftentimes rather than bouncing from single issue to single issue. Those collected editions have been, really a godsend for me as I just sit down and go through 30 issues of a comic book or something. It is much, much easier to deal with the collected editions as opposed to the single issues. And then I have to say the thing that I found to be the absolute most pleasant surprise is that upon subscribing, upgrading, or renewing the membership, they actually give a free gift as part of the subscription. And this is a free physical comic book. It takes about 10 to 12 weeks according to the website, but I think for me, it took maybe 2 or 3 weeks at most after providing my mailing address. And what I got is a nice, oversized, soft cover copy of The Death of Superman 30th Anniversary Deluxe Edition. And had a exclusive cover just for Ultra members, which was drawn by Ivan Reis. The collection collects Superman 73 through 75, Adventures of Superman 496, 497, Justice League of America 69, Action Comics 683 to 684, Superman the Man of Steel 17 through 19, News Time, The Life and Death of Superman number 1, and Superman Day of Doom number 1 through 4. There's also a whole bunch of really cool bonus material in the book, sketches and the like. it's a really very, very cool edition of the Death of Superman storyline. And that, you get it as part of your membership, a free physical comic book, a very, very cool, oversized trade paperback. So I find this new tier to be definitely worth the price of admission. It is extremely rewarding on the ultra tier to only be behind 30 days when you're predominantly using DC Universe Infinite. But on top of that, I think the collected editions as a way of reading digitally, and the expanded selection of Vertigo titles in particular have just made this really a must buy for me. I'm super pleased with this reward tier, and I'm just very, very glad that I bumped it up. Now, if I remember correctly, I think the regular rate is $7.99 a month or $74.99 a year, and I think Ultra annual is $99 a year. So it's not that much more as far as what you're paying. And I really do enjoy being on a yearly model as opposed to a monthly model. You save a little bit of money, and you don't have to worry about it for a whole year. So I think this new tier is definitely worth the price of admission. It comes highly recommended. I'm having the time of my life reading all these old Vertigo books.
Yeah, I totally second that. And I do the same thing with annual. Typically, when I get tax returns or something of that nature, or when I get some of my paychecks from teaching online courses, I usually pony up and get my yearly subscription to both. And I could not be happier with both of my subscription services. I read the best of both titles. I'm reading my Nightwing right now. I'm reading a bunch of different stuff at Marvel. So if you're looking to get in the game and you're looking to read comics for the first time, these are the easiest places to do that and just hit the ground running. And there's limitless possibilities with readership.
Yeah, absolutely, man. So you're taking us to the movies, Chris. What is your nerd commendation this week?
Okay, I'm recommending a horror movie. Who would have thought?
I'm so proud of you right now.
Look at us. Oh. Look at us. Who would have thought? To borrow a Paul Rudd meme, on the Quantumania episode. Who would have thought? Not me. Dave, have you seen Nope?
I have not yet seen it. I really, really want to, but I've just not found the time yet.
Oh, it's streaming exclusively on Peacock, and even if you're just ponying up $4.99 for that first month, or maybe you get a free trial, it's worth it because my God, this is a movie, man. And so like your evangelism, your bullying, it's paid off because like I'm here for this. I loved this movie. Impeccably acted. You've got Daniel Kaluuya as O.J. Haywood, Keke Palmer as his sister Emerald, Brandon Perea as Angel Torres, Michael Wincott as Antlers Holst, who's apparently been in a lot of stuff, but that I haven't seen, and who has one of the coolest freaking voices ever. Stephen Yeun as Ricky Jupe Park, who's apparently been cast in Thunderbolts, I think, so I'm excited about that. And then the OG, one of the greatest voice actors, one of the greatest actors of cinematic history, Keith David as Otis Haywood Sr. So this is about the residents. I'm reading the IMDb synopsis right now. The residents of a lonely gulch in inland California bear witness to an uncanny and chilling chilling discovery. And so like it's like aliens and horses, and it's just one of the coolest experiences, and everything that they say. This is my first Jordan Peele movie. I haven't watched Get Out yet. I've been dying to for years, but everything they say about Jordan Peele as a visionary when it comes to filmmaking, like it's hard to believe that this is the same guy who made us giggle with Key and Peele sketches, as like such like you can see it from like a storytelling and like a cinematic perspective. He's such a fan of Hollywood and the movie making process, and the shots that you see in this movie are so freaking beautiful and imaginative and evocative of emotions. Like you feel so many different emotions watching this film. You absolutely have to see it. It is a wild ride, and I could not nerd commend it enough.
So I have seen both Get Out and I think his second movie was Us, and I like
Yes.
both a really great deal. So I've been excited for Nope for a while. I just have not found the time yet to sit down and watch it. But I find Peele to be a very, very smart movie maker and somebody who brings a really fresh voice into the horror genre. I have been so pleased to see his work, and I'm very, very excited to see this. So I'm here for it, man.
All right, that wraps up another episode of the Nerd Byword. We thank you so much for riding along with us and listening and your support. If you would please like and subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, whether that is Apple Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn Radio, or nerdbyword.com.
And of course, find us on social media. We're all over the place. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at Nerd by Word, and individually at That Nerd Dave and at That Nerd Kris. Let us know how you felt about Quantumania and what you think of the points that we raised in today's episode.
And as always, stay well and stay nerdy.
The Nerd Byword is written and produced by Kris and Dave, two nerds with a love of all things pop culture. The podcast features music by Al Jimenez with additional drops composed by Joe Biondi. Our show art is by Ashery Design. Find us at nerdbyword.com and wherever podcasts are available.